the new matriarch of the family. My daughter Emily shouted those words as she placed a golden crown on the head of Victoria, her husband's mother. Her mother-in-law, that woman, whom I had only known for 2 years. And she did it in my house, in my living room, in front of everyone. It was a New Year's Eve party. There were over 40 guests, family, neighbors, friends I had known my whole life, all of them with glasses in their hands, waiting for the midnight countdown. Music was playing in the background. The string lights blinked on the walls I had painted myself 3 years ago. The applause started immediately. Some guests whistled. Others raised their glasses as if this were a historic moment worthy of celebration. Victoria was beaming. She was wearing that bright red sequin dress that must have cost over $300. Her makeup was perfect, applied at some expensive salon. Her jewelry sparkled under the colored lights. She looked like a queen receiving her official coronation. I was standing by the buffet table. I was holding an empty tray in my hands. I had just been clearing dirty plates that guests left everywhere. Used napkins, half-finished plastic cups. No one else was doing it. No one offered to help. Everyone was busy having fun. And I, the owner of the house, the hostess, was picking up trash while my daughter crowned another woman as the head of my family. My hands began to tremble. It wasn't nervousness. It was fury. A deep rage rising from the pit of my stomach to my throat. That woman, that intruder, was being proclaimed matriarch of my family. In my living room, under my roof, with my furniture as witnesses. No one looked at me. All eyes were fixed on Victoria. On Emily, who clapped excitedly next to the crown shining on her mother-in-law's head. On Ryan, who smiled proudly beside his mother. It was as if I had ceased to exist. As if my presence had no value. As if 40 years of sacrifice were erased with a single theatrical gesture. I dropped the tray on the table. The metallic noise caught a few people's attention, but they quickly refocused on the spectacle in front of them. I walked slowly toward the sound system. Every step I took echoed in my head. I felt my heart pounding hard against my ribs. I picked up the microphone that was resting next to the speakers. I switched it on with a steady hand. The high-pitched feedback it makes when activated cut through the laughter, the applause, and the background music. Silence settled over the room like a cold wave. Everyone turned toward me. Emily stared at me, her eyes wide. Her expression changed from joy to worry in seconds. Victoria kept that fake smile plastered on her face, but something in her eyes revealed unease. Ryan looked down at the floor, as he always did when he sensed conflict. I took a deep breath. The air entered my lungs heavily. I looked directly into my daughter's eyes. Those eyes I had known since the day she was born. Those eyes that now looked at me as if I were a stranger, as if she didn't recognize me. And then I spoke. I announced something out loud that made Emily's legs tremble. Something that completely wiped the smile off Victoria's face. Something that caused several guests to gasp in shock. Something that caused my daughter to wobble, lose her balance, and collapse onto the carpet. The same carpet I bought 5 years ago with my tip money from the diner. But to understand how we got to that terrible moment, I need to go back to the beginning. I need to tell you what my life was like before everything exploded. Before my daughter decided to replace me with a woman who was barely part of our lives. My name is Eleanor. I am 69 years old. I was born and raised in a small town, where I learned from a young age that you don't get anything without hard work. I have been a widow for 14 years. My husband, Robert, died of a heart attack when he was just 55. It was sudden. It was devastating. But I didn't have time to stay paralyzed by grief. When Robert died, Emily was 21. She was at the State University, studying business administration. I was working as a waitress at a diner downtown. Robert had been a mechanic, but he never made much money. We lived paycheck to paycheck. Always. But we were happy. Or at least I thought we were. After his death, I was left alone with the debts. The funeral alone cost almost $5,000. The medications he took during his last months added up to another $1,500. Emily's university tuition required payments of $400 every month, and the rent for our apartment was $800 each month. I sat at the kitchen table one night doing the math. I cried for hours. The numbers didn't add up. My salary as a waitress barely reached $2,000 a month, even with tips. It wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough. But I didn't give up. I got a second job cleaning offices at night. I left the diner at 6 in the evening and got to the offices by 7. I cleaned until midnight. I came home exhausted, slept for 5 hours, and started all over again the next day. Those were hard years. Years when my hands always smelled like bleach and detergent, where my feet hurt so much I could barely walk on Sundays, where I ate leftovers from the diner to save money on food. But Emily finished her degree. She graduated with honors, and I was right there in the front row, crying with pride, still in my waitress uniform because I didn't have time to change. After graduation, Emily got a job at a logistics company. She made good money, much better than I ever had. She told me that now she would help me, that it was my turn to rest, that I had done enough. But I didn't want to rest. I wanted something of my own, something that was mine, something no one could take away from me. So I started saving. Every dollar I had left over went straight into a savings account. I quit the night cleaning job. I stayed on as a waitress, but asked for more shifts. I worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7 when there were special events. For 8 years, I saved. 8 years of pinching every penny. 8 years without buying new clothes. 8 years without eating out. 8 years without taking a vacation. All with one clear goal: to buy a house, and I did it. 6 years ago, I bought this house. It's not big. It has 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room, a kitchen, and a small backyard. But it's mine. Completely mine. I paid $60,000 for it, money that came from my own hands, from my swollen feet, from my sleepless nights. The day I signed the papers at the closing, I cried right there in the title company's office. The man looked at me strangely, but I wasn't ashamed of my tears. They were tears of victory, of pride, of satisfaction. At 63 years old, I had achieved what many people never achieve in a lifetime. Emily was happy for me. She helped me move in. We painted the walls together. We bought furniture at thrift stores and refinished it. We planted flowers in the yard. She sewed the curtains herself. Those were wonderful days. Days when I felt like my daughter and I were an invincible team. We lived together in that house for 3 years. I kept working at the diner. Emily kept working at the logistics company. We split the bills. We cooked together on weekends. We watched movies in the living room on Friday nights. Everything was perfect. Everything was just as I had always dreamed. Until Ryan showed up. 3 years ago, Emily came home talking about a new coworker, Ryan. She told me he was nice, hardworking, respectful, that he came from another city, that he was alone here because his family lived far away. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Emily had other boyfriends before, relationships that lasted a few months and then ended. I thought this would be the same, but I was wrong. Ryan turned out to be different, or at least he seemed to be at first. I met him a month later. Emily brought him over for dinner on a Saturday night. He was a man of average height, dark hair, a kind smile. He greeted me respectfully. He brought flowers. He complimented my cooking. I liked him. He seemed like a good man. He seemed to truly love my daughter. Over the next few months, Ryan visited the house often. He was always polite. He helped with the dishes. He asked about my day. He treated me with consideration. I began to imagine that maybe he would be the man Emily would build her future with. But there was something I didn't know. Something Ryan didn't mention for a long time. His mother, Victoria. The woman who would change everything. The woman who would become my worst nightmare. The first time I heard Victoria's name was 6 months after Ryan and Emily started dating. We were having dinner in the kitchen on a Sunday night. I had made roast chicken with potatoes. Ryan was sitting next to Emily. They were eating and talking animatedly about their jobs, about plans for the following weekend. Then Ryan mentioned that his mother was coming to visit. He said he hadn't seen her in months, that he missed her very much, that she wanted to meet Emily. My daughter got excited immediately. She said it would be wonderful to meet her future mother-in-law. I just nodded and kept eating. I didn't think much of it. All mothers want to meet their sons' girlfriends. It's natural. It's normal. I would have done the same if Emily had a brother. But something in the way Ryan talked about his mother made me a little uneasy. There was pride in his voice. Too much pride. As if he were talking about a queen instead of a regular mother. Victoria arrived 2 weeks later. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was home resting after a long shift at the diner. My feet were aching. I was planning to take a shower and go to bed early. But then the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there she was. Victoria, a tall woman, maybe in her early 60s, brown hair with blonde highlights. She wore expensive clothes, black pants that looked designer, a white silk blouse, shoes with heels that shone like they were brand new. Her makeup was perfect, long, dark red nails, and a gaze that swept over me, from head to toe, in 2 seconds. She didn't greet me right away. First, she observed my house from the doorway. Her eyes scanned the living room behind me, the furniture, the curtains, the floor, as if she were evaluating everything. Then she looked at me again, at my simple clothes, my unmanicured hands, my hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Finally, she spoke. She told me she was Ryan's mother, that she was here to meet her future daughter-in-law's family. She held out her hand. I shook it. Her grip was firm, too firm, as if she wanted to prove something with that simple gesture. I invited her in. She entered with slow steps, still observing everything around her. She stopped in the living room. She looked at the sofa Emily and I bought at a used furniture store, the coffee table I had varnished myself, the photographs on the wall, the curtains my daughter sewed with her own hands. She asked me how long I had lived here. I told her 6 years, that I had bought the house with my savings. She nodded, but made no positive comment. She didn't say it was nice. She didn't congratulate my effort. She just nodded as if she didn't care. Emily arrived shortly after with Ryan. My daughter was excited. She had dressed up specially to meet Victoria. She was wearing a new dress she bought with her first paycheck of the month. She had put on makeup, done her hair carefully. She wanted to make a good impression. Victoria greeted her with 2 kisses on the cheek. She looked her over the same way she had looked at me. Up and down, slowly, evaluating every detail. Then she smiled. She said Emily was very pretty, that Ryan had chosen well. My daughter blushed. She seemed happy with her future mother-in-law's approval. I made coffee. I served some cookies I had bought that morning. We all sat in the living room. Ryan was beaming. Emily was nervous but happy. I tried to be nice, and Victoria kept watching, always watching. The conversation started normally. Victoria asked Emily about her job, about her studies, about her future plans. My daughter answered enthusiastically. She talked about her goals, her dreams, how she wanted to grow professionally. Then Victoria turned her gaze to me. She asked me what I did for a living. I told her I was a waitress, that I had been working at the same diner for over 20 years. She arched an eyebrow. She asked if that was all, if I had ever wanted to do something more, something better. I felt a knot in my stomach. The way she said something better implied a judgment, as if being a waitress was embarrassing, as if my work had no value. I took a deep breath. I explained that thanks to that job, I had raised my daughter alone, that I had paid for her college, that I had bought this house. Victoria smiled, but it wasn't a genuine smile. It was a cold smile. She said it was admirable, but her tone of voice said the opposite. Then she changed the subject. She started talking about her own life, about her big house in another city, her travels, her husband who had been a successful businessman before he died. She talked for almost an hour about herself, her family, her social standing, everything she had and had ever had. Emily and Ryan listened, fascinated. I just nodded from time to time as I served more coffee. That first visit lasted 3 hours. When Victoria finally said goodbye, she said it had been a pleasure to meet us, that she hoped to see us soon, that maybe we could visit her in her city someday. Ryan offered to drive her to the hotel where she was staying. When they all left, I was alone in the living room. I picked up the empty cups, the cookies no one finished, and I felt a strange sensation in my chest, something I couldn't quite define. It felt like a warning, like a premonition that this woman would bring trouble. But I didn't say anything. I didn't want to seem paranoid. I didn't want to ruin my daughter's happiness. So I kept quiet. I washed the cups, and I tried to convince myself that everything was fine. Over the next few months, Victoria visited the city several times. She always stayed in expensive hotels, always wore elegant clothes, always talked about her perfect life. And every time she came, she spent time with Emily and Ryan. Sometimes they invited me to join them. Other times, they didn't. I started to notice changes in my daughter. Small changes, almost imperceptible at first. Emily started to worry more about her appearance. She bought more expensive clothes. She got her nails done every week. She went to hair salons she used to consider too costly. Her way of speaking changed, too. She started using more elaborate words, mentioning luxury brands, comparing things. She would say that one restaurant was better than another, that one neighborhood was more exclusive, that one car was a better class. I tried not to make a big deal about it. I thought it was just a phase. That Emily was trying to impress Ryan's family. That soon she would go back to being the simple girl I had raised. But I was wrong. The changes continued, and they became more obvious. One day she came home and told me Victoria had suggested she cut her hair a certain way, that it would look more professional, more elegant. Emily cut her hair exactly as Victoria had told her. When I asked if she liked it, she hesitated. She said yes, but her voice didn't sound convinced. Another time, Victoria commented that she should change her style of dress, that she should wear more neutral colors, more subdued. Emily started dressing in black, gray, and white. She put her colorful dresses in the back of the closet, the dresses she used to love so much. I tried to talk to her. I asked if she was comfortable with all these changes. Emily told me she was. That Victoria just wanted to help her, that her mother-in-law had a lot of experience in the professional world, that her advice was valuable. I didn't argue. I didn't want to create conflict. But deep down I was worried. I saw my daughter transforming into someone different, someone I didn't fully recognize. After a year of dating, Ryan proposed to Emily. It was at a fancy restaurant, with a diamond ring, red roses, all the romance a woman could wish for. My daughter came home that night glowing. She showed me the ring, crying with happiness. I hugged her. I told her I was happy for her. And it was true. I wanted her to be happy. But a part of me was afraid. I knew that marrying Ryan meant Victoria would officially become part of our lives, that she wouldn't just be an occasional visitor anymore. She would be family, permanent family. The wedding was planned for 6 months later. Emily wanted a simple ceremony, something small and intimate. But Victoria had other ideas. She said her only son deserved a big wedding, memorable, worthy of his family name. She started making decisions. She suggested the reception venue, an expensive venue that charged $5,000 just for the rental. Emily hesitated. She said it was too expensive, that they preferred something cheaper so they could save money after getting married. But Victoria insisted. She said she would pay the difference, that they shouldn't worry about the money, that the important thing was to have a proper celebration. Ryan supported his mother. He said she was right, that you only get married once, that it was worth it. Emily finally agreed. And from that moment on, Victoria took control of the wedding. She chose the menu, the flowers, the decorations, the photographer, the cake, everything. My daughter barely participated in the decisions. I participated even less. I tried to offer my opinion a couple of times. I suggested certain things. But Victoria elegantly dismissed my ideas. She'd say my proposal was nice, but that she knew something better, something more appropriate, something of higher quality. I felt displaced, as if my role as mother of the bride had no value, as if my opinion didn't count. But I didn't say anything. I didn't want to ruin Emily's happiness. I didn't want to be seen as the problematic mother causing conflicts. The wedding went according to Victoria's plans. It was large, elegant, expensive. There were over 100 guests. Most were acquaintances of Victoria and Ryan's family. My friends and family were in the minority. I felt out of place at my own daughter's wedding. Victoria wore a gold dress that sparkled more than the wedding gown. She commanded attention all night, greeting everyone, posing for photos, giving speeches. She acted as if she were the star of the event. I was present, but silent, watching from the sidelines, feeling invisible, wondering at what point I had lost my daughter. After the wedding, Emily and Ryan moved into a new apartment, bigger than my house, in a nicer neighborhood. Victoria helped them with the security deposit, $3,000, which she gave as a wedding gift. My daughter was grateful. I was too. But something inside me was uneasy, because every time Victoria gave something, she seemed to expect something in return. Not money, not concrete favors, but control, influence, power over my daughter's decisions. And that was exactly what she was getting. The first few months after the wedding were relatively calm. Emily and Ryan lived in their new apartment. I stayed in my house. We saw each other on weekends. We'd have lunch together. We'd talk about her married life, about her job, about their plans for the future. But I noticed that every time we talked, Victoria's name came up constantly. Victoria had told her how to decorate the living room. Victoria had recommended which brand of appliances to buy. Victoria had an opinion on what clothes Ryan should wear to work meetings. Victoria had suggestions for everything. Absolutely everything. At first, I thought it was normal. Mothers-in-law often get involved in their newly married children's lives. But this was different. These weren't just suggestions. They were orders disguised as advice. And Emily followed every single one without question. One day, my daughter told me Victoria was coming to stay with them for 2 weeks. She said her mother-in-law wanted to spend more time in the city, that she missed Ryan, that she would also use the time to look at properties because she was thinking of moving here permanently. That news hit me like a ton of bricks. Victoria living permanently in the same city meant her influence over Emily would increase, that she would be present in every decision, in every moment. But I didn't say anything. I just nodded, smiled, and kept my worries to myself. Victoria arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. This time she didn't stay in a hotel. She moved into Emily and Ryan's apartment. Into the guest room my daughter had decorated with so much care. 2 weeks, Emily had said. But 2 weeks turned into 3, then 4, and finally 2 full months. During that time, Victoria behaved as if the apartment were hers. She rearranged the furniture when Emily was at work. She moved things around in the kitchen. She bought new decorations without consulting them. She invited her own friends over for coffee in my daughter's living room. Emily told me these things, but always with a forced smile. She said her mother-in-law just wanted to help, that she had good taste, that her suggestions improved the apartment. But I saw the exhaustion in her eyes. I saw the tension in her face. I knew she wasn't completely happy with the situation. I asked her directly if it bothered her that Victoria was staying so long. Emily hesitated before answering. She said no, that it was fine, that Ryan was happy to have his mother close, that she didn't want to be the selfish wife who separated a son from his mother. Right then, I understood what was happening. Victoria had manipulated the situation so that Emily felt guilty about any discomfort. My daughter couldn't complain without sounding like a bad person. Without seeming like the difficult, insensitive wife, Victoria finally returned to her city, but only for 3 weeks. Then she came back. This time she stayed for a month. And so, a cycle began. She came and went constantly. Each time, she stayed longer. Each time, she interfered more in my daughter's life. I kept visiting Emily on weekends, but the visits changed. We no longer talked alone. Victoria was always present, sitting in the living room, participating in our conversations, giving her opinion on everything, correcting things I said, contradicting my advice. One Saturday, I was helping Emily in the kitchen. We were making lunch together like we used to. I suggested she add more salt to the soup. Victoria appeared suddenly. She said too much salt was unhealthy, that she had taught Ryan to eat healthy, that Emily should do the same. She took the salt shaker from my hand, put it away in the cabinet, and added herbs she had brought herself. Emily said nothing. She just looked down and continued cooking. I clenched my fists inside my pockets. I swallowed my anger, and I kept silent. These small dismissals became frequent. Victoria always found subtle ways to show that she knew more, that she was better, that her methods were superior to mine, and she did it with such elegance that it was hard to confront her without seeming overdramatic. 6 months went by. Emily visited my house less and less. She said she had a lot of work, that she was tired, that Victoria needed her company because she felt lonely in the city. There was always a reason, always an excuse. I missed her. I missed our talks, our meals together, our Friday night movies. But I understood she had a new life now, a husband, different responsibilities. So I waited. I waited for her to call, to visit when she could. Then the day came when everything got worse. It was a Sunday afternoon. Emily called me. Her voice sounded strange, nervous. She told me she needed to talk to me, that she would be at my house in an hour. I made coffee, bought some pastries from the corner bakery. I waited anxiously. When she arrived, I immediately noticed something was wrong. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her face looked haggard. She had lost weight. We sat in the living room. She stared at her coffee cup without drinking, fidgeted with her hands, taking deep breaths, as if gathering the courage to say something difficult. Finally, she spoke. She told me that she and Ryan had been thinking about their future, that they wanted to have children soon, that they needed to save money, that the apartment they lived in was expensive, that the rent was eating up a large part of their income. I nodded as she spoke. It seemed reasonable. Having children requires financial stability. Saving is smart. I didn't see where the conversation was going. Then Emily dropped the bomb. She told me that Victoria had suggested they move into my house, temporarily, just until they saved enough money to buy their own house, maybe a year, maybe 2. I froze. The words wouldn't come out of my mouth. Emily kept talking quickly. She said they would pay a share of the expenses, that they wouldn't be a burden on me, that I could also spend more time with them, that it would be good for everyone. I asked her if this idea was hers or Victoria's. Emily looked down. That gesture gave me the answer I needed. It had been her mother-in-law's idea. Obviously. I took a deep breath. I told her I needed to think about it, that it was a big decision, that my house was small, that I wasn't sure there was enough space for 3 adults living together. Emily looked disappointed. She said she understood, that she didn't want to pressure me, but that they really needed this help, that Ryan agreed, that it would only be temporary. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned for hours, thinking about the pros and cons. On one hand, I wanted to help my daughter. I wanted her to save money, to have a stable future. On the other hand, something deep inside me was screaming that this was a trap, that Victoria had a hidden agenda behind this suggestion. But a mother's love was stronger than my instincts. A week later, I agreed. I told Emily they could move into my house, that I would give them the master bedroom, that I would sleep in the smaller room, that we would make it work. My daughter hugged me, crying. She said I was the best mom in the world, that she would never forget this favor, that she would make it up to me somehow. I stroked her hair like I did when she was a child, and I tried to ignore that voice in my head warning me that I was making a terrible mistake. Ryan and Emily moved in 2 weeks later. They brought their furniture, their boxes, their belongings. My small house suddenly felt even smaller. But I smiled. I welcomed them. I made special meals. I tried to make them feel comfortable. The first few days went well. We had dinner together. We talked in the living room at night. It seemed like everything would work out, that my decision had been the right one. But then Victoria showed up. Of course she showed up. She wasn't going to let her son live in my house without supervision. She arrived on a Friday afternoon, with 2 large suitcases. She said she was coming to visit them for a few days, that she missed them, that she wanted to make sure they were settled in okay. Emily and Ryan welcomed her. I just nodded, once again, staying silent, once again, swallowing my discomfort. Victoria inspected the entire house. She went into every room, checked the kitchen, the bathroom, the backyard. She made comments about everything. She said the curtains were outdated, that the furniture needed updating, that the color of the walls was depressing. I gritted my teeth. It was my house, my space, the place I bought with my own money. But she criticized it as if it were an abandoned place in need of rescue. That night, I had trouble sleeping again. I heard voices in the living room. Victoria was talking to Ryan and Emily. Their voices were low, but the tone was clear. She was giving orders, organizing, planning. The next morning, Saturday, I woke up to find Victoria reorganizing my kitchen. She had moved pots and pans, switched the dinner plates, thrown some of my old Tupperware in the trash without asking me. I asked her what she was doing. She smiled. She said she was just helping, that the kitchen needed better organization, that more people lived here now and they had to optimize the space. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her she had no right to touch my things. But Emily appeared just then, smiling, thanking Victoria for her help, saying the kitchen looked much better now. I swallowed hard. I nodded, and I walked out of my own kitchen, feeling invaded. The few days Victoria had promised to stay turned into weeks. She slept on the living room sofa. She said she didn't mind, that she wanted to be close to her son. That besides, she had decided to look for a house in this city permanently. That, in the meantime, she would stay here with us. My house was no longer mine. Victoria was everywhere. She cleaned without being asked. She cooked even when I had already planned the menu. She had visitors over without telling me. She gave orders as if she were the owner. And the worst part of all was that Emily allowed every single one of these invasions. My daughter no longer defended me. She no longer consulted me. She just followed whatever Victoria said. The situation in my house became unbearable as the months went by. Victoria didn't just stay the weeks she had promised. She moved in permanently. She claimed that while she looked for her own house, it was most convenient to stay with us. That way, she could spend time with Ryan. And besides, she was helping me with the bills and household chores. But her help wasn't help. It was control. Absolute control over every aspect of my life. It started with small things. She would change the television channel when I was watching something. She'd say her show was more interesting, that I could watch mine later. Emily and Ryan never objected. I would just end up going to my room. Then she started changing the decor. One day, I came home from work and found she had taken down my family photographs from the living room wall. She had replaced them with paintings she bought herself. Abstract paintings that cost over $200. I asked her why she had done that. She smiled that fake smile I knew so well. She said the photographs made the room look dated, that these paintings modernized the space, and besides, she had paid for them herself, so I shouldn't complain. I looked for my photographs. I found them stored in a box in the garage. Photos of Emily as a child, of my husband, Robert, of my parents who had passed away, all our family memories, stuffed in a box like they were trash. I wanted to cry, but I didn't, not in front of her. I put the box in my room, and once again, I swallowed my pain. The kitchen became her exclusive territory. She decided what was cooked every day. She bought the groceries without consulting me. She used my pots, my pans, my utensils, and when I tried to cook something, she always had a criticism. It needed salt. It was too greasy. She made it better. One Sunday, I wanted to make Emily's favorite dish, my Sunday pot roast, which I had made since she was little. It was our tradition. Every Sunday, I cooked that dish. Emily always said it was her favorite food in the world. I was in the kitchen, preparing the ingredients when Victoria walked in. She asked what I was doing. I told her. She frowned. She said that dish had too many calories, that Emily needed to watch her figure if she wanted to have children soon, that it was better to make steamed fish with vegetables. I tried to defend myself. I told her it was a family tradition. That one Sunday a month wouldn't hurt. She took the chicken out of my hands, literally snatched it from me. She said no. She would cook something healthier, that I could rest. I left the kitchen with tears in my eyes. I went to my room. I listened as Victoria cooked in my kitchen, using my things, in my house, and I was hiding in my own room like an unwelcome guest. When they called for lunch, I went down. On the table was steamed fish. Tasteless vegetables. Emily ate in silence. Ryan praised his mother's cooking. I tried a bite. It tasted like nothing. But I said nothing. My daughter didn't ask about the pot roast. She didn't remember our tradition. She just ate what Victoria had prepared and said thanks for the healthy meal. I knew then that I had lost more than just my kitchen. I had lost the traditions that bound my daughter to me, the little rituals that made our relationship special. Everything was being erased, replaced by Victoria's new rules. The control extended to the household expenses. Victoria insisted that we keep a detailed log of everything that was spent. She bought a special notebook. She wrote down every dollar spent on food, utilities, cleaning products. At first, it seemed reasonable. 4 people were living there. It was logical to split the costs equally. But then the audits began. Victoria reviewed every receipt. She questioned every purchase I made. She said I paid too much for certain things, that she knew cheaper places, that I didn't know how to manage money. I worked. I earned my own money. And yet, Victoria made me feel like an irresponsible teenager who couldn't handle her finances. One day, I bought a face cream that cost $15. It was something I had used for years. My skin is sensitive. That specific cream didn't cause allergies. But Victoria saw it in the bathroom. She picked up the jar, read the label, and then she came to find me. She asked if I had really paid $15 for it. I said yes. She shook her head. She said it was a waste, that there were $3 creams at the drugstore that worked just as well, that I was throwing money away, that with that mentality, we would never save enough. I wanted to tell her it was my money, that I decided what to spend it on. But the words wouldn't come out. I just stood there like a fool while she lectured me on domestic economy. The rules in the house increased. Victoria decided we had to have fixed schedules for everything, for meals, for showers, for watching television. She made a schedule and taped it to the refrigerator door. I had the earliest shower shift, 5:30 in the morning, because according to her, I was the one who left earliest for work, so I had to get up earlier. There were no exceptions on weekends. 5:30 in the morning, even when I didn't have to work. My television time was from 9 to 10 at night. 1 hour. In my own living room. In my own house. 1 hour to watch what I wanted. The rest of the time, the remote control belonged to Victoria or Ryan. The complaints began to pile up in my throat. Every day I swallowed more anger, more frustration, more helplessness. But I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I didn't confront her, because I was afraid. Afraid that Emily would see me as the problematic mother, as the terrible mother-in-law who couldn't accept her son-in-law's family. Besides, every time I tried to talk to my daughter alone, there was no opportunity. Victoria was always there, always interrupting, always having something to say or do that required Emily's attention. The weekends were the worst. Before, Emily and I would go out together. We'd go shopping. We'd grab coffee at a cafe. We'd talk for hours. But now, Victoria organized the outings. She decided where to go, what to do. And obviously, she was always included. One Saturday, they suggested going to the mall. I needed to buy new shoes. Mine were worn out from working so much. I agreed to go with them. I thought maybe I could talk to Emily on the way. But in the car, Victoria took the passenger seat. Emily drove. Ryan sat in the back with me. The entire trip, Victoria talked non-stop about her experiences, her acquaintances, her opinions on everything. I just stared out the window. At the mall, we went into a shoe store. I found some comfortable shoes for work. They cost $40. I was about to buy them when Victoria walked over. She looked at them, wrinkled her nose, said they were ugly, that they made me look old, that there were better options. She took me to another store. She showed me shoes that she liked. Elegant, low-heeled, pretty. Yes, but they cost $90. I told her they were too expensive, that I didn't need something so fancy for working in a diner. She insisted. She said I should invest in quality, that those shoes would last longer, that the price was justified. Emily backed her mother-in-law. She said she was right, that I deserved something nice. I ended up buying the $90 shoes. Not because I really wanted them, but because it was easier to give in than to keep arguing. We left the store. Victoria smiled, satisfied. She had won again. That night, in my room, I looked at the new shoes. They were pretty, but I knew they were impractical for my job. In 1 week, they would be ruined. I had wasted $90 because I didn't have the courage to say no. I sat on my bed. I looked around. This was my room. In my house. The house I bought with my own hard work. And yet, I felt like a guest. Like someone living on borrowed time in a place that didn't belong to them. I thought about talking to Emily, telling her everything I felt, everything Victoria was doing, but I was afraid of her reaction. Afraid she wouldn't believe me. Afraid she would choose her mother-in-law over me, so I kept silent once more. The months passed. The situation got worse. Victoria no longer disguised her control. She gave orders openly. She asked me to do things as if I were her employee. To wash her clothes, to make her tea, to clean her space in the living room where she slept. I obeyed, time and time again. I obeyed because I didn't know what else to do, because my daughter didn't see what was happening. Or maybe she did, but had decided to ignore it. One night, Victoria organized a dinner party. She invited some friends she had made in the neighborhood to my house. Without consulting me, I got home from work and found 5 strange women sitting in my living room, drinking wine, eating appetizers that Victoria had prepared with ingredients from my kitchen. She introduced me as Emily's mother, who also lives here. Not as the owner of the house, not as Eleanor, just as Emily's mother. As if my identity were limited to that role. As if I were no one beyond that. Her friends greeted me cordially, but then they continued talking among themselves. I was not part of the meeting. I was just the older lady who lived there. I went up to my room. I heard their laughter until after midnight. When I came down the next day, the living room was a disaster. Dirty glasses, plates with leftover food, crumpled napkins everywhere. Victoria was still asleep on the sofa. Emily and Ryan had already left for work. I cleaned everything myself. It took 2 hours. My hands smelled like detergent. My back ached. But I said nothing. Again, staying silent. Again, swallowing humiliation. That afternoon, when Victoria woke up, she didn't thank me for cleaning. She didn't even mention the party from the night before. She just made her coffee and sat down to watch television as if nothing had happened. I watched her from the kitchen. I watched how she occupied my space, how she lived in my house, how she controlled every aspect of my life, and I felt helpless. A helplessness so profound it was suffocating. But I still did nothing. I still hoped things would get better on their own, that Victoria would finally find her own house and leave, that Emily would wake up and see what was happening. But I was wrong. Things were not going to get better. On the contrary, they were about to get much, much worse. 8 months had passed since Emily and Ryan moved into my house. 8 months since Victoria had settled in permanently. 8 months in which I had become a shadow in my own home. But there was a moment when I thought things might change. A moment when I saw a ray of hope. It was when Emily sought me out one afternoon and told me she had good news. We were alone in the kitchen. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had just gotten home from work. Emily had come home early that day. Victoria had gone to the hair salon. Ryan was at the office. For the first time in months, my daughter and I had a moment of privacy. Emily was smiling. A genuine smile I hadn't seen on her face in a long time. She took my hands. She told me Ryan had received a promotion at work, that he would now be earning almost double what he made before, that they could finally start looking for their own house. I felt my heart fill with relief, with hope, with a happiness I hadn't experienced in months. I asked her when they would start looking, when they thought they might move. She said in a few months. That they wanted to save a little more first, make sure they had enough for a down payment on a decent house. Maybe 6 months, maybe less. I hugged her tight. I told her I was happy for them, that they deserved it. And it was true, but I was also happy for me, for the chance to get my house back, my space, my life. That night, I ate dinner with a smile on my face. Victoria noticed my good mood. She asked me what was wrong. I told her I just had a good day at work. I didn't mention the conversation with Emily. I wanted to keep that hope for myself, to protect it from any interference. For the next few weeks, I tried to be more patient. To tolerate Victoria's invasions better, I told myself it was temporary, that they would be leaving soon, that I just had to hold on a little longer. I helped Emily look for houses online. We looked at real estate websites together at night when Victoria was already asleep. My daughter showed me pictures, asked for my opinion. We talked about how she would decorate each room, where she would put her furniture. Those were beautiful moments. Moments when I felt I was getting my daughter back, that our connection was still there, underneath all the layers Victoria had built between us. But then, a month after that conversation, everything changed. Emily came home one Friday night with a worried expression. Ryan was behind her. Victoria was waiting for them in the living room. I was making dinner. I heard voices, conversations in low tones. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was serious. I turned off the stove. I peeked into the living room. The three of them were sitting there. Emily looked distressed. Ryan had his head in his hands. Victoria was speaking in a calm but firm voice. I walked closer. I asked them what was wrong. Emily looked at me with watery eyes. She said a problem had come up, that Ryan's company was going through restructuring, that his promotion had been put on hold temporarily, that his salary would go back to what it was before. I felt my stomach drop. That meant they couldn't save as quickly as they had planned, that the move would be delayed, maybe months, maybe longer. Victoria spoke up. She said they shouldn't worry, that these things happened in the corporate world, that the important thing was to stick together as a family, that they could stay here as long as necessary, that I surely wouldn't have a problem with that. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my answer, my confirmation, my blessing to indefinitely extend this situation that was destroying me from the inside. But I couldn't say no. Not in front of my daughter, who was looking at me with those pleading eyes. Not in front of Ryan, who looked defeated. I couldn't be the selfish mother who kicked them out in their time of need. I said yes. That of course they could stay. That it was no problem. That the important thing was for them to be okay. The words came out of my mouth automatically, as if my brain no longer had control over what I said. Emily hugged me, thanked me, said I was the best mom in the world, that she would never forget this. But I felt empty. The hope I had carried for weeks evaporated in seconds. Victoria was smiling. That smile I knew so well. The smile of someone who had just won another battle. She said we would make it work, that we would be a united family, that together we would overcome any obstacle. I couldn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling of my room, mentally calculating how much longer I would have to endure. 6 more months. Another year, maybe more. There was no way to know. And then something inside me broke. It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears. It was just a feeling of resignation, of accepting that this was my reality now, that my house was no longer mine, that my life no longer belonged to me. I stopped looking for moments alone with Emily. I stopped suggesting things. I stopped having opinions. I became a ghost walking through my own house, making no noise, not bothering anyone, not really existing. Victoria noticed my submission, and she took advantage of it. Her orders became more direct. She no longer disguised them as suggestions. She simply told me what to do, and I obeyed. One day, she asked me to wash the windows. It was raining outside. I told her I'd rather wait until it stopped raining so the job would look better. She insisted. She said there was time before it got dark, that I could do it now. I washed the windows in the rain. The water poured down on me. My clothes were soaked. When I finished, I was shivering from the cold. I went inside. Victoria looked at the windows. She said they looked fine. She didn't thank me. She just nodded as if it were my obligation. I changed my clothes in my room. I looked at myself in the mirror. I barely recognized myself. I was 69, but in that moment, I looked 80. My face was gaunt. My eyes were dull. My posture was stooped. I was being slowly consumed. But I still didn't rebel. I still believed that things would eventually get better, that this nightmare would end someday, that I just needed to be patient, to keep waiting, to keep enduring. The weeks passed, and Victoria continued to expand her control. Now she decided when I should go to the doctor, what medications I should take, what time I should go to bed. She tried to control every aspect of my existence. One day, I felt sick. I had an intense headache, nausea. I told Emily I should probably go to the doctor. Victoria overheard the conversation. She said it wasn't necessary, that I was just tired, that I should rest, that she would make me a special tea. I drank the tea. The headache didn't go away, but I didn't insist on going to the doctor. Victoria had said it wasn't necessary, and I, as always, obeyed. My relationship with Emily deteriorated more every day. We hardly talked anymore. When we did, it was superficial. We talked about the weather, her job, things that didn't matter, never about what really mattered, never about how I felt, never about what Victoria was doing. I tried to connect with her one more time. It was a Sunday morning. I found her alone in the backyard. She was watering the plants I had planted years ago. I sat down next to her. I tried to start a real conversation. I asked her if she was happy, if her marriage was going well, if she felt comfortable living here. She told me yes, that everything was fine, that Ryan was a good husband, that Victoria was a great mother-in-law who helped her a lot. I took a deep breath. I asked her if she ever felt that Victoria went too far, that maybe she interfered too much in her decisions. Emily tensed up. She asked me why I said that, if I had a problem with her mother-in-law. I quickly denied it. I said no, that I just wanted to make sure she was okay. Emily relaxed her shoulders. She said I shouldn't worry, that Victoria only wanted the best for everyone, that she was lucky to have such a dedicated mother-in-law. I knew then that I had lost my daughter completely. Victoria had done her job perfectly. She had convinced Emily that everything she did was out of love, out of dedication, for the good of the family. I never tried to talk to her about it again. There was no point. Emily was blind. Or maybe she didn't want to see. Maybe it was easier to believe everything was fine than to face reality. Money became another point of conflict. Victoria suggested we should pool all our incomes into a joint account, that it would be easier to manage the household expenses, that it would be fairer for everyone. I refused. That was one of the few times I said no directly. My money was mine. I had earned it with my work. I was not going to hand it over to an account that Victoria would control. She got upset. She said I was being selfish, that if I really cared about the family, I wouldn't have a problem sharing, that this was how united families operated, that I was showing distrust. Emily intervened. She said Victoria was right, that it would be easier if we all contributed equally, that she didn't understand why I was resisting. I held my ground. I said I would pay my share of the expenses as I always had, but my bank account would remain private. It was a small victory, one of the last I would have. Victoria did not forget that challenge. She started charging me for absurd things. She said I had to pay for excessive use of hot water, for the electricity my room consumed, for the space I took up in the refrigerator. She calculated ridiculous amounts. $5 for this, $10 for that. I paid without protesting. It was easier to pay than to argue, than to face her anger, than to risk Emily seeing me as the problematic mother. My life had become a series of small humiliations, of constant concessions, of forced silences, but I still believed it was just a matter of time, that eventually Ryan would get another promotion, that they would move out, that I would get my life back. I clung to that hope. It was the only thing keeping me sane, the only thing that gave me the strength to get up every morning, to go to work, to return to a house that no longer felt like mine. But I was about to discover that things were much worse than I imagined, that there was a plan behind all of this, a plan Victoria had been executing from the beginning, and that plan was about to be revealed in the most painful way possible. December arrived. The year was ending. I had been sharing my house with Emily, Ryan, and Victoria for over a year of humiliation, of silence, of watching my space become foreign territory. Victoria announced she was throwing a New Year's Eve party. At my house. She said it as if it were her decision, as if she didn't need my permission. Emily clapped excitedly. She said it would be wonderful to ring in the new year surrounded by family and friends. I asked who they planned to invite. Victoria pulled out a list. There were over 40 names. Her acquaintance. Neighbors she had cultivated as friends. Some of Ryan's relatives. And only 3 people I knew. 3 out of 40. I said the house was too small for that many people. Victoria dismissed my concern. She said they would fit perfectly, that she would take care of organizing everything, that I should just relax and enjoy. But I didn't relax. The days leading up to the party were chaotic. Victoria ordered changes to the decorations, moved furniture, bought expensive ornaments. She hired a catering service that cost $1,000. $1,000 for food for a party in my house that I hadn't authorized. I asked who was going to pay for it. She smiled. She said we would all contribute, that we would split the cost 4 ways, $250 each. I had just paid the household bills. I didn't have that extra money. I told her so. Victoria frowned. She said that was absurd. How was it possible I didn't have $250? That I surely had it stashed away somewhere. That I should stop being cheap. Emily intervened. She offered to pay my share. She said it was no problem. That it was her New Year's gift to me. But I knew what it meant. It meant I owed my daughter. That I was indebted. That Victoria could use that against me later. I accepted because I had no choice. I said I would pay her back when I got my next paycheck. Emily said it wasn't necessary. But I insisted. I didn't want to owe anything. I didn't want to give Victoria any more power over me. December 31st arrived. The house was transformed. Gold and silver balloons everywhere, string lights, tables with elegant tablecloths. It all looked beautiful. But it didn't feel like my house. It felt like an event hall rented by a stranger. The guests started arriving at 8 in the evening, one after another. They filled my living room, my dining room, my yard. There were people everywhere, loud conversations, laughter, music at full volume. I felt out of place. No one really talked to me. They'd greet me politely, and then move on. Everyone was looking for Victoria. She was the center of attention, the perfect hostess, radiant in her red dress, smiling, pouring drinks, introducing people to each other. Emily was by her side the whole time, following her like a shadow, helping her with everything, fetching things when Victoria asked, nodding at every word her mother-in-law said. It was as if my daughter had become that woman's personal assistant. Ryan mingled with the guests, proud, happy to see his mother shine. He would glance at me and smile occasionally, but he didn't come over. He didn't talk to me. I was just another piece of furniture in the party's decor. I took refuge in the kitchen. At least there I could do something useful. I washed dishes, arranged trays, got more ice from the freezer. No one thanked me. No one noticed my work, but at least it kept me busy. It gave me a purpose in the midst of this invasion. It was 11 at night when I heard the music volume go down, voices calling for attention. I left the kitchen. I peeked into the living room. Victoria was standing in the center, holding a glass of champagne. All the guests were gathered around her in a circle. Emily was next to her, smiling. Ryan on the other side, proud. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. In my daughter's hands was a crown. A golden, sparkling, ridiculous crown. Victoria began to speak. She said she wanted to make a special announcement before midnight. That this year had been wonderful. That it had strengthened family bonds. That in Emily, she had found the daughter she never had. The guests listened attentively. Some smiled. Others nodded. I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. Something terrible was about to happen. I could feel it in my bones. Emily took the floor. Her voice trembled with emotion. She said she wanted to thank Victoria for everything, for her guidance, for her wisdom, for teaching her to be a better wife, a better woman, a better person. Then she raised the crown. She held it high for everyone to see, and she spoke the words that shattered what little was left of my heart. The new matriarch of the family. The silence lasted a second. Then the applause erupted. Emily placed the crown on Victoria's head. In my living room, in my house, in front of 40 witnesses, my daughter was crowning another woman as the leader of our family. Victoria accepted the crown with false modesty. She put a hand to her chest, said it wasn't necessary. But her smile betrayed her. She had waited for this moment. She had planned it. She had orchestrated this whole thing from the beginning. The guests kept clapping. Some whistled. Others raised their glasses. It was like witnessing a royal coronation. Absurd, grotesque, painful, and I was still standing in the kitchen doorway, invisible, erased, as if I had never existed. Something snapped inside me in that moment. It wasn't gradual. It was instant, like glass hitting the floor and shattering into 1,000 pieces. I watched my daughter clapping along with everyone else. I watched Victoria smiling with that ridiculous crown on her head. I watched them celebrating my disappearance in my own house. I didn't feel sadness anymore. I didn't feel pain. I felt a cold, absolute clarity. For over a year, I had endured humiliation. I had swallowed my pride. I had given up my space, my dignity, my entire life. And for what? To end up being completely erased. I walked into the living room. My footsteps echoed on the floor, but no one heard me. Everyone was focused on Victoria, on her moment of glory, on her victory over me. I approached the sound system. I picked up the microphone we had rented for the party. I switched it on. The sharp feedback cut through the music, cut through the laughter, cut through the applause. Suddenly, all eyes turned to me, 40 pairs of eyes watching me, waiting. Curious. Emily looked at me with surprise. Her smile froze on her face. Victoria maintained her expression of superiority, but something in her eyes revealed worry. Ryan looked down at the floor, as he always did when he sensed trouble. I took a deep breath. I looked directly at my daughter. And then I spoke. My voice came out clear, firm, without the tremor it had held for months. Congratulations, Emily. You've crowned the new matriarch of the family. What a special moment. I paused. The guests exchanged confused glances. They didn't know if it was sarcasm or sincerity. I continued. But there's something everyone here should know. Something important before we celebrate this change of power. Victoria took a step forward. Her hand rose as if to stop me. But I kept talking. Nothing could stop me now. This house where we are celebrating. This house with all its walls, its furniture, every square inch of space. It's mine. Bought with my money. Paid for with 30 years of working as a waitress, with double shifts. With tips I saved, penny by penny, for 8 years. The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear my own breathing through the microphone. The deed is in my name. Eleanor. Just my name. No one else. And yet, here we are, crowning a woman who didn't put a single dollar into this property, who arrived a year ago as a temporary guest, and who is now apparently the owner of everything. Emily had gone pale. Her lips were trembling. Ryan was holding her arm as if she were about to fall. Victoria was no longer smiling. The crown on her head suddenly looked ridiculous. Pathetic. For months, I have been treated like a guest in my own home. Worse than a guest, like an employee. I have washed, cooked, cleaned. I have obeyed orders. I have accepted criticism about how I spend my money, about how I dress, about how I live, all in the place that I bought with my own effort. Some guests began to lower their glasses. The smiles had vanished. The festive atmosphere evaporated in seconds. But that's not all. 3 days ago, I got a call from my bank. A very interesting call. It seems someone tried to transfer the deed to this house. Someone submitted forged documents. Documents with my signature faked. Documents that tried to put this house in the names of Ryan and Victoria. Murmurs erupted among the guests. Emily let out a choked cry. Ryan turned white as a sheet. Victoria maintained her composure, but her hands were shaking. The bank contacted me because the signatures didn't match their records, because I've been a customer at that institution for 20 years, because they know my handwriting, my signature, and they knew those documents were fraudulent. I pulled an envelope from my pocket. I held it up for everyone to see. Here are the copies the bank provided me. Documents that someone in this room tried to use to steal my house from me. My assets. The only thing I have after a lifetime of work. I looked directly at Victoria. She held my gaze for a second. Then she looked away. The crown on her head no longer sparkled. It looked like what it was. A ridiculous accessory for a pathetic farce. So yes, let's celebrate. Let's celebrate the new matriarch. The woman who tried to take what isn't hers. The woman who manipulated my daughter. Who invaded my home. Who tried to erase me from my own life. And who also tried to legally steal the only valuable thing I own. The guests were motionless. No one knew where to look. Some began to back away toward the doors. Others just stared, mouths open, at the scene unfolding. And you, Emily. My daughter looked up. Tears were in her eyes. Her face was a mixture of shock, confusion, and horror. You, who crowned this woman over your own mother. I hope you're proud. I hope it was worth it. Because as of this moment, you, your husband, and your dear mother-in-law have exactly 1 week to get out of my house. Emily's legs trembled. She wobbled. Ryan tried to hold her, but she collapsed. She fell onto the carpet, her body limp, fainted from the shock. In front of all the guests, in front of the crown that rolled across the floor when Victoria bent down to help her, I turned off the microphone. I left it on the table. I walked through the guests, who parted to let me pass. I went up the stairs to my room. I locked the door, and for the first time in over a year, I breathed freely. I heard the chaos downstairs. Agitated voices. People leaving. The party was over. The new year would arrive in 20 minutes, but no one was celebrating anymore. There was nothing left to celebrate. I sat on my bed. My hands were still shaking. Not from fear, from adrenaline. From liberation, I had told the truth. I had finally defended what was mine. I was no longer the silent woman swallowing humiliation. I was Eleanor, owner of this house, and no one was taking that from me. Outside, I heard fireworks. Midnight had arrived. The new year was beginning, and for me, it truly was a new beginning. I heard knocking at my door. Emily's voice, crying, begging me to open up, to talk, that it was all a misunderstanding, but I didn't answer. Not tonight. I had already said everything I had to say. The knocking continued for a few minutes. Then it stopped. I heard footsteps moving away, voices in the living room, Victoria giving orders as usual. But this time, her orders fell on deaf ears. Her power had evaporated with my words. I lay down, fully clothed. I closed my eyes, and I slept deeply for the first time in months. No nightmares, no anxiety, just peace. The peace of someone who had finally found her voice. I woke up early on January 1st. The house was silent. A different kind of silence than in recent months. It was no longer the uncomfortable silence of someone tiptoeing in their own home. It was the calm after the storm. I got up. I showered without rushing, without respecting the ridiculous schedule Victoria had imposed. I used all the hot water I wanted. I took my time. It was my house. My bathroom, my water. I went down to the kitchen. The remnants of the party were still everywhere. Dirty glasses, plates with half-eaten food, crumpled napkins. The gold and silver balloons hung sadly from the ceiling. Victoria's crown was kicked into a corner of the living room. I made coffee, just for me. I sat at the kitchen table and drank it slowly, savoring every sip, enjoying the moment. No one interrupted me. No one gave me orders. No one criticized me. I heard movement upstairs, hurried footsteps, whispered voices. I knew they were awake. They had probably spent the whole night talking, planning, trying to find a way out of the situation I had created. Emily came down first. Her face was swollen from crying, deep dark circles, matted hair. She looked horrible. A small part of me felt pity, but it was a very small part. The part that was left of the mother who used to protect her from everything. She sat down across from me. She said nothing for a moment, just looked at me with those red eyes, waiting for me to speak first, waiting for me to break the ice. But I didn't. It wasn't my job to make her feel comfortable anymore. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was broken. She asked me if what I said last night was true, about the forged documents, about the attempted theft. I told her yes, that every word was true, that the bank had proof, that I could show her the copies if she wanted. She shook her head. She said she didn't know anything about it, that she had never participated in anything like that. That Ryan didn't either, that it must have been a mistake, a misunderstanding, someone else using their names. I looked at her steadily. I asked her if she really believed that, if she really thought it was a coincidence, that just when Victoria had been living here for months, controlling everything, someone would try to steal my house using documents with forged signatures. Emily looked down. She had no answer. Or maybe she did, but she didn't want to admit it. She didn't want to accept that the woman she had crowned as matriarch was a thief, a manipulator, a criminal. Ryan appeared in the kitchen. He looked worse than Emily. He had several days' worth of stubble. His eyes were sunken. He sat down next to my daughter, put his hand on hers, a protective gesture that came far too late. He apologized to me. He said he knew nothing about the documents, that his mother had never mentioned anything, that he was sure it was a misunderstanding, that we could resolve it, that it wasn't necessary for them to leave. I told him they had 1 week, 7 days to find another place, that I was not going to change my mind, that I had endured enough, that this was my house, and I wanted my life back. Ryan tried to negotiate. He said they needed more time, that 1 week wasn't enough to find an apartment, to pack, to organize everything. He asked for at least a month. I flatly refused. I told them they had over a year to save and find their own place, that the suspended promotion was no excuse, that if they had really wanted to move, they would have done so already. That 1 week was more than generous, considering what they had tried to do. Victoria finally came down. She walked with her head high, trying to maintain her dignity, but she looked different. She was no longer the queen who controlled everything. She was just an older woman who had been found out, unmasked in front of everyone. She sat at the table. She looked at me coldly. She said I was overreacting, that the documents were probably a clerical error by the bank, that I was using it as an excuse to kick them out, that I was being cruel to my own daughter. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless laugh. I asked her if she really expected me to believe that, after everything she had done, after how she had taken control of my house, my life, my daughter. I reminded her of every humiliation, every order she had given me, every time she treated me like an employee, every moment she made me feel invisible in my own home. I listed every abuse, every invasion, every lack of respect. Victoria tried to interrupt me, to defend herself, but I continued. I told her I had seen her game from the beginning, that I knew it was all a strategy, that she had manipulated Emily to control her, to use her against me. I told her the coronation last night had been her final mistake, that it had shown her true intentions, that she wanted to erase me completely, to take my place, to take my house, my daughter, my life. Emily started crying again. She said I was being unfair, that Victoria had only tried to help, that the coronation had been her idea, not her mother-in-law's, that she just wanted to honor the woman who had supported her so much. I asked her at what point she decided her mother-in-law was worth more than her own mother, at what point she forgot everything I had done for her, the years of work, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, all so she could go to college, so she could have a better future. My daughter didn't answer. She just cried, her face in her hands. Ryan held her, but even he looked uncomfortable. He knew they had no defense, that everything I said was true. I gave them clear instructions. They had until the following Sunday, 7 days exactly. They had to take all their belongings, leave the house as they found it. If they tried to stay longer, I would call the police. If they tried to cause trouble, I would press charges over the forged documents. Victoria shot up from her chair. She said this wasn't over, that she had connections, that she knew lawyers, that I would regret treating her this way. But her threats sounded empty, desperate. I told her to do whatever she wanted, to call whomever she wanted, that the house was legally in my name, that the forged documents were on file at the bank, that any lawyer would tell her she didn't have a case. She stormed out of the kitchen, went upstairs, making noise. I heard her slamming doors, moving things, probably destroying something out of rage, but I didn't care anymore. She had no power over me. Emily and Ryan remained seated. They didn't know what to do, where to go, how to process everything that had happened. I finished my coffee. I stood up. I told them to start packing, that the clock was ticking. For the next few days, the house was a silent battlefield. They packed in silence. I went about my normal life, went to work, came home, cooked only for myself. I no longer shared anything. Emily tried to talk to me several times. She would find me when I was alone, ask me to reconsider, to give her another chance, that we could start over. Without Victoria, just her and Ryan. But I didn't budge. I had given them too many chances. I had been patient for over a year. I had endured humiliations no mother should ever endure. There was no patience left in me. On Saturday night, 2 days before the deadline, they found an apartment. It was small, in a less nice neighborhood than where they lived before. It cost more than they wanted to pay, but they had no choice. It was that or the street. On Sunday morning, they started moving their things out, box after box, piece after piece of furniture. Ryan rented a truck. They made several trips. I watched from my bedroom window, watching as, little by little, my house emptied of their presence. Victoria left first. She didn't even say goodbye. She got into a cab with her suitcases. She looked at the house one last time. Our eyes met through the window. In her gaze, there was hatred, resentment, but also defeat. She had lost, and she knew it. Emily and Ryan finished moving their things out by evening. The house was finally empty of their presence. All that remained were the spaces where their furniture had been. Marks on the floor, smudges on the walls, but those were just physical traces. Nothing that couldn't be fixed with time and effort. My daughter stood at the door, keys in her hand. She looked at me one last time. Her eyes were still red from crying. She had aged 10 years in 1 week. She was no longer the radiant woman who arrived here over a year ago. She was someone broken, confused, lost. She held out the keys to me. I took them without a word. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but the words didn't come. What could she say? What apology would be enough after everything? Ryan waited in the car, the engine running, ready to leave. To close this painful chapter of their lives, Emily walked slowly toward the vehicle. She stopped halfway down the walk, turned around one more time. "Mom," her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't answer. I just watched her get in the car. I watched them drive down the street, the taillights disappearing into the darkness, and I felt something strange in my chest. It wasn't complete satisfaction. It wasn't pure victory. It was relief, mixed with a profound sadness. I had gotten my house back, but I had lost my daughter in the process. I closed the door, locked it. I walked through the empty house. My footsteps echoed differently now. The silence was total, absolute. After so much noise, so much invasion, so much chaos, there was finally peace. But it was a lonely peace. 2 weeks passed. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I painted the walls Victoria had stained with her changes. I rearranged my furniture. I took my photographs out of the box where I had stored them. I hung them back up in the living room. My family, my memories, my history. Emily didn't call. I didn't call her either. An abyss existed between us now. An abyss that might never be crossed. Or maybe it could. With time. A lot of time. I returned to my routine. Work, home, work, home. But it was different now. Now I returned to a home that was truly mine. No one criticized my food. No one moved my things. No one gave me orders. Freedom tasted sweet after so long in captivity. One afternoon in February, 2 months after the party, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors. I thought maybe it was a salesperson or a neighbor. I opened the door cautiously. It was Emily. She looked better than the last time. She had gained some weight back. Her face had more color, but there was something different in her eyes, a maturity that wasn't there before, an understanding that only comes with pain. She asked if she could come in. I hesitated. A part of me wanted to close the door in her face, to protect the peace I had fought so hard to regain. But she was my daughter. Despite everything, she was still my daughter. I let her in. We sat in the living room, on the same sofa where we had talked so many times when she was young, when it was just the two of us against the world. Emily spoke. She told me she had spent the last few weeks thinking, reflecting on everything that had happened, on how she had allowed Victoria to take control of her life, her decisions, her relationship with me. She told me that she and Ryan had talked a lot, that he had finally admitted he knew his mother had crossed boundaries, that he had been too permissive, too blind to Victoria's behavior. She told me they had confronted Victoria about the forged documents, that she denied it at first, but eventually she admitted it, that she had tried to transfer the property, that she thought it was for the best, that I was old, that I didn't need such a big house, that they would make better use of it. The justification of a thief. Convenient, selfish. Without real remorse, Emily asked me for forgiveness, with tears running down her face. She told me she had been blind, that she had let her mother-in-law destroy our relationship, that she had chosen wrong, time and time again. She asked if I could forgive her, if we could try to rebuild what we had lost. She didn't expect it to be immediate. She understood it would take time, but she wanted to try, if I would let her. I looked at her in silence for a long moment. Part of me wanted to hug her, to tell her yes, that all was forgiven, that we would go back to how we were, but I knew that was impossible. We would never be as we were. Too much had happened, too much had been broken. I told her the truth, that I was hurt, deeply hurt, that what I had lived through that year had left scars that wouldn't fade easily, that her crowning of Victoria had been the most painful betrayal of all. But I also told her that she was my daughter, that she would always be my daughter, that a mother's love doesn't disappear. Even when it's buried under layers of pain and disappointment, it was still there, weak, wounded, but there. I proposed something. We could see each other once a month, get coffee, talk, slowly, without rushing. Rebuilding trust takes time. Maybe years, maybe never completely. But we could try. Emily accepted, through her tears. She hugged me. I hugged her back. But it was different. It was no longer the hug of a mother protecting her child. It was the hug of two adults who had been through a war, who had survived, but who bore the scars. She asked about Victoria, if I knew where she was. I told her no, that I didn't care, that I hoped to never see her again. Emily nodded. She told me Ryan had set boundaries with his mother, that she wasn't living with them anymore, that he saw her once a month. Nothing more. It was a change. Small, but significant. Emily left an hour later. She promised to call me to schedule our next coffee. I nodded. I closed the door behind her. And this time, I didn't feel that terrible emptiness. I felt something like hope. Fragile, cautious, but hope nonetheless. The weeks passed. Emily kept her promise. We met for coffee. We talked about simple things at first. Her work, my work, the weather. Nothing deep. Nothing that hurt too much. Slowly, very slowly, we began to rebuild something. It wasn't what we had before. It would never be that again. But it was something new. Something based on honesty, on clear boundaries, on mutual respect. One day, she told me she was pregnant. 3 months. It would be my first grandchild. She asked if I would be present, if I would want to be part of her child's life. I told her yes, that of course I would, but I also made it clear there were rules. That Victoria was not welcome in my house, ever again. That if Emily wanted to visit me with my grandchild, she would come alone, without her mother-in-law, without excuses. Those were my terms. Emily accepted without protest. She understood. Finally, she understood. Today, 6 months after that New Year's Eve party, I am sitting in my living room. My house is peaceful. The photographs of my family hang on the walls. My furniture is where I want it. My kitchen smells like my food. My traditions. I still work at the diner. I still live my simple life. But now, it's my life. Completely mine. Without invasions. Without outside control. Without humiliation disguised as help. Emily and I see each other twice a month now. We get coffee. We talk. We laugh sometimes. Other times, there are uncomfortable silences. But we keep trying, step by step, day by day. Ryan comes sometimes. He apologizes every time we see each other. He says he didn't know how to handle his mother, that he should have stopped her sooner, that he regrets everything that happened. I nod. I accept his apologies. But I don't forget. I will never forget. I know nothing about Victoria. Emily occasionally tells me she's still in the city, that she tried to get close again, that she tried to manipulate the situation with the pregnancy, telling Emily that a grandmother has a right to know her grandchild, that they can't keep her away. But Emily, for the first time, set limits. She told her that until she apologized to me, until she fully admitted what she did, their relationship would be distant. Controlled, without the total access Victoria demanded. It's progress. Slow, painful, but progress. Sometimes, at night, I think about that party, about the moment I took the microphone, about the words that came out of my mouth after so much silence. And I feel pride. Pride for having defended myself, for having reclaimed my dignity. I paid a high price. My relationship with my daughter will never be what it was. There are cracks that will always remain. But I gained something more valuable. I gained my freedom, my voice, my right to exist in my own space, without asking permission. This house is mine. My life is mine. And no one, ever again, will make me feel invisible in my own home. Victoria tried one last move 2 weeks ago. She showed up at my door, unannounced, like she used to. She rang the doorbell insistently. I saw her through the window, standing there, expecting me to open, to let her in. But I didn't. I stayed on the other side of the door, listening to her knock, listening to her call my name, listening to her finally get tired and leave, defeated once more. Because I learned something important through all this. I learned that silence is sometimes complicity, that to constantly give in is to lose pieces of yourself. That love does not mean accepting abuse, not even when it comes disguised as family. I learned that defending what is yours doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you strong. It makes you worthy. It makes you the owner of your own story. And that lesson, even though it came late, even though it cost so much, was worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of pain. Because now, at 69 years old, I am finally free.